Okay, so as you probably saw in the title, this presentation will be going over student financials and student records touch points. So what that means is that there's a lot of student records tables in PeopleSoft that directly impact student financials. And these include academic calendars, uh, adjustment calendars, and even residency data. And all of that records data affects term fees and tuition calculation. So CSUF has tuition and fees set up based on career program and academic plan, as well as by term and by session. So all of these are set up or assigned by student records. For example, in this screenshot, we're looking at the academic calendar. And the academic calendar essentially serves as the timeline or like a master schedule that tells the system when important school events happen. So, for example, things like start and end dates for each term, session and and start dates for summertime, enrollment deadlines, like when students can add or drop classes. And for example, this is where the withdrawal without penalty period comes in. This date is set and in this page, and it determines when students can drop classes without receiving a W grade on their transcript. However, this date also affects student financials. For main campus students, if their enrollment add date is after this withdrawal deadline, this February 4th, for spring, for example, they would be subject to a late add fee, which we assess on the student financial side. So everything connects in one way or another. So another records table that acts in a similar way is the term session table. Student financials also uses the information here set by records as a calendar, using the term begin date as an anchor for many of our financial processes. So for example, in the springtime, this past spring semester, the term begin date was January 18th. And for example, we use tuition is calculated based on this term begin date for the fall and the spring terms. We also use the term begin date when setting up our billing calendars, and we rely on this date each semester to accurately assess tuition fees and establish the correct payment due dates for each student. We also use this term begin date when determining our refund deadlines, and it's especially important when a student is matriculated and their academic program record is created. So for the system to calculate tuition correctly, the effective date of an academic program record for a student has to be on or before this term begin date. And if program record's effective date is later than this term begin date here, then that means that the system may produce an error during tuition calculation and the student may not get their fees assessed. So everything in the system basically uses that date to stay on schedule. Okay, so to expand on our refund deadlines, during the fall and spring terms, the adjustment option uses the term start date to adjust fees based on the number of days since the first day of the term. And that brings us back to the term begin date we just discussed. So this is basically the touch point between student financials adjustment calendars and the records term table. That term start date, the 1/18/2025 for spring, for example, is expressed as 0 in our system. So an adjustment calendar dictates how term and class fees are adjusted when a student drops or withdraws from a class. The system determines the refund percentage based on the number of days a term or a class has been in session. So for example, the adjustment calendar in this screenshot is our standard calendar, and it's attached to all of our tuition and fee item types for our main campus students. So each calendar has an adjustment reason, meaning the reason for the drop. And fees are adjusted differently depending on why the student drops or withdraws. For example, a student who drops due to reasons beyond their control, such as a class was canceled, they may be entitled to a full refund. The screenshot here shows the adjustment reason SDRP. And that just means that a student went into their portal and dropped the classes themselves. And as you can see here in this, the bottom set part of the setup for spring 2025, the to date corresponds to the withdrawal without penalty period from the academic calendar that we looked at earlier in that first slide. So that means that this student, if the student drops prior to that date set on the academic calendar, they would be entitled to 100% refund based on our setup, our adjustment setup. So that is where this 17 days comes in. Here's just one more example. So in this case, the adjustment reason, the drop reason is TWTH. That's term withdrawal. And it's used when a student drops to 0 units on or after the first day of the term, but before the 60% of the term has passed. So in this case, the student may be eligible for a prorated refund of tuition and mandatory fees based on how much of the term they attended. And once again, we see the importance of the 0 date right here. That's the term begin date. That represents the first day of the term. So when a student was, even if a student was enrolled for just 1 day, the system will calculate a prorated charge based on that single date of enrollment. And that's where that 99.10% proration comes in. So certain drops or adjustment reasons, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, like a class cancellation, a medical refund, those result in a 100% refund of all fees. And just as a side note, according to the Title V refund policy, when a student gets a refund after dropping classes, the school has to first use that money to pay back any financial aid the student may have received. So anything like federal or state grants. And whatever money is left after that is given back to the student, or it's used to pay off anything they still owe. And this same rule applies if a student drops all of their classes on or after the first day of the term. It's the same refund policy. So this next slide shows the touch point that allows the fees to adjust based on these calendars we just looked at. The adjustment comes from the term fee or the course or class fees. So as you can see in this screenshot, the spring tuition term fee has a standard adjustment calendar attached to it. And this means that any enrollment changes, like dropping a class, will trigger fee adjustments based on the rules and dates defined by this standard adjustment calendar. And this is a critical setup because it ensures that students are charged or refunded accurately depending on when changes in their enrollment are made. So now that
So
we've
now
covered,
that we covered, oh, sorry, Carly, you
go
ready?
ahead, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So now that we've covered how adjustment calendars are affected by fee calculations, we're going to move to term fee setup and fee triggers. Another important area where student records and student financials connect. Each term fee is linked to a specific term fee, which is an item type, which is coded to match a particular semester, as you see in the screen. Most term fees use criteria to define which students should be charged. For example, the post-bac term fee uses specific criteria to target students in graduate and also post-bac programs. Criteria in PeopleSoft Student Financials works by comparing student data, such as, academic career programs and like academic plans, to determine which falls into which tuition group. This data comes directly from our own student records. In this way, the criteria acts as a bridge between two fee logic in student financials and academic data in student records. Any updates to a student academic information, like, switching programs or academic plans, can impact whether a fee is assessed. And this makes it very accurate. To update data in student records is essential for correct billing, which is very important. In our next slide, you will also see the criteria helps identify which student should be charged a specific fee based on their academic data. Sometimes we need to just, use logic to make exceptions. Like when a student meets, the general criteria, but still shouldn't be charged. That's where adjustment equations come in. In this example on the screenshot, the P-back, which is the post-bac, term fee includes the adjustment equation in tab 4, which is titled Term Subfees. This equation checks if the student is in a traditional program, and if they are, it removes the pullback fee, even if they were initially selected by the criteria. It's an added layer that helps us fine-tune how fees are applied based on more complex conditions. In our next slide, we're going to also talk about more on term fee setup. So as you saw on the adjustment equations, we can remove and fee based on specific conditions. So let's look at how equations can also be used to trigger a fee in the first place. In this next example, the credential term fee doesn't use criteria like most other fees. It uses the equation to also do a fee trigger. This equation is designed to determine if a student is eligible for credential program, and the eligibility is very specific. The parameters for this are set by the College of Education. So only students who meet those exact conditions will have to be fee and credential applied in this area. As you see in our next slide, these parameters are defined on the CMS credential subplan in tab 6, as you see in the screenshot. They include fields like credential status, credential objective code, student standing code, and academic program, and all of these help identify the correct student population for these fees. And in our next slide, there's another critical factor when it comes to tuition, which is the residency data. This system uses the student's tuition residency to decide whether they should be charged resident or also non-resident tuition. It is important to note that the Student Business Services can't update the residency data. It only comes from student records. But Student Financial relies on it during term fee setup to determine whether or not the assess non-resident tuition. This system specifically looks for tuition residency sorry about that, that matches the student's academic career. The effective term of residency record must be equal to or earlier than the term being calculated. This system may not access fees correctly sometimes, but isn't very important. On the next slide, this is our tuition calculation. So we talked a lot about how tuition is set up behind the scenes, like how term fees, criteria, and residency all play role to determine what a student gets charged. But what does it actually look like in tuition? It was calculated into the system. In PeopleSoft, there's a page called Tuition Calculation, as you see, where you can see the process in action. It shows the student's academic career and program for each term, and is where the system runs the logic to assign the right tuition and fees. One important field is the tuition cal required. This system automatically checks this box if the students enrolled changed. So like if the student enrollment changes, that box is also triggered, as you see in this slide. You also see the tuition cal date turn, which shows the last time the system calculated tuition for the student. This helps us track when the tuition was updated, and if something seems off, it's a great place where we can do troubleshooting. For example, in the screenshot, we see an error message on the student's tuition cal page, as Carla is going to show you right there. These types of messages are important because they usually signal that something is in the system in the student's enrollment area on the tuition cal is set up in lining and is our cue to investigate what's the issue. In this case, the error could mean a few different things. One common cause is an issue in the student's program, like date or program plan page that comes after the term begin date, which it shouldn't. If that's the issue, the student records may need to review the program plan page to ensure the data is correct for the student. In some cases, they may even need to delete the last row, calculate tuition again, and re-add the row in order to clear the error. It is also important to check the relationship between the term activation, like when a student is term activated, and the program plan stack. For example, if someone edited existing row instead of inserting a new row, it could cause a mismatch on the student's term activation. And in some cases, the error might even be tied to the residency issue. The takeaway here is the errors on the tuition calculation page are like a roadmap. They help point the potential breakdowns between student financials and also student records. In the next slide, defaults for tuition cal required flag are set to business unit level. Setting this default to yes will turn the tuition cal, as you see on here. Red flag are for every student as soon as they have a record of student card turn. CSU at Fullerton always sets the flag on no, as you see highlighted in yellow. So not everything triggers a flag. For example, changing the amounts on our fee tables, whether it's class fees or term fees, do not trigger tuition calculation. But again, many of changes done in student records side will set this tuition flag, yes, and affect the assessment of fees. Among these are adding residential officials, posting changing grades, and changing students groups. Changing enrollment drop date, enrollment request panel, process and override changes. So as you see, this is also what also can trigger different tuition cals. So on our next slide, we just want to thank you And we want to go over again. So as we've seen in all of our slides, even though the tuition cal red flag may not be triggered by everything, like simply updating a fee amount, it is affected by several updates on the student record side. It always changes the residency, student groups, academic standing. Our enrollment details can also flip and flag different directly impacted. Tuition recalculated correctly. That's why it is very important for both student records and student financials to stay in sync. When we understand how our students talk to each other, we can better support students, avoid billing issues, and resolve errors quickly. At the end of the day, it's just important to do that. It's also about building and reliable processes that ensures students are charged a correct amount and fairly every time. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Okay, and on this slide is the link to go to the survey. We ask that you do fill it out, please, for student financials and student records touch points. Is there any questions? And if you have any further subjects that you would like us to cover, please let us know, and we can see if we can put together a presentation to share that information.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi.
So when I am working with student records, there's been a glitch that I've been dealing with pretty much every single time, where when I'm looking for the record, it logs me out of every other version of the campus system, so I have to open everything back up in a new browser. Do you know anything about that? Is that just a weird thing on my computer?
I believe that's a problem that is known with the PeopleSoft program that they've got running now with the when they went switched to the tiles. But yeah.
Yeah, like I don't need student records very often. Mostly when I'm doing instant card applications for students, I need to verify their billing addresses.
Uh-huh. Student records is actually handled by the registrations office area, not by us, but I do know that there are some quirks with the program where it does inconvenience us to,
Okay, so it's known. Hopefully they're working on it.
yes.
All right, thank you.
I just
Hi.
have a, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Just a general question. Do you guys work directly with students or are you kind of more behind the scenes?
Our office does work with students. The team today, May and Carla basically work behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But we do have a customer service team that Albert Sim oversees, and everything that we do work directly with students.
Okay, so if they see something wrong with their bill, they would reach out to you guys.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, my name's Jennifer from housing. I know I email you all the time, but my question might be more specific for my department. But I was wondering if there's a way that you all can host a training, or if there is already a training on how to pull like queries and reports from the customer accounts under student admin. So for me to be able to pull a report of like everyone who has an outstanding balance still, specifically for housing fees. Um, is there a training on that I can already access, or a training that you all could host?
We could probably look into hosting something for you,
Okay.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
I know Christine Koch from my team
Yes.
is very good and works a lot with you.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can probably get something together.
Okay. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I know myself and a couple others in my department would be definitely interested in attending something like that.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Certainly. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for attending. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you.